It's Saturday, August 8th, and here's what you need to know by noon. Saudi Arabia signed a mutual defense treaty yesterday with a nuclear-armed country in Islam's holiest city. Plus, the stock market closed at a record high one day after a report showing American employers cutting jobs. And the odds of a rate cut are still exactly zero. And the president walked back his own deal on the Strait of Hormuz. We start in Mecca. Yesterday, at the Al Safa Palace, 3 men signed what is being called the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The core clause is a single sentence, and it is the sentence that matters. Any armed attack against any one of the 3 states shall be regarded as an attack against them all. That is the language of a military alliance. The joint statement says the purpose is to strengthen collective deterrence against any act of aggression. This did not come out of nowhere. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan signed a 2-country version of it in Riyadh in September of last year, and the relationship since then has become physical rather than ceremonial. Pakistan has reportedly deployed several thousand troops, fighter aircraft, drones, and an air defense system to Saudi Arabia. What happened yesterday is that Turkey joined, and the whole thing moved to Mecca. The setting was not an accident. Sharif performed Umrah that morning, before the signing. Here's the part that is easiest to get wrong, so we are going to go slowly. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Saudi Arabia has now promised to treat an attack on Pakistan as an attack on itself, and Pakistan has promised Saudi Arabia the same. That does not mean Saudi Arabia has been placed under a nuclear umbrella. We want to tell you exactly what the agreement says about that, which is nothing. The text does not mention nuclear weapons, not extended deterrence, not an umbrella, not a word. Mansoor Ahmed, of the Strategic and Defense Studies Center at the Australian National University, says the pact is unlikely to extend Pakistan's nuclear deterrent to its partners, because Pakistan's nuclear posture is built around India and has been for decades. He calls it better understood as a framework for regional security cooperation than as an alliance comparable to NATO. You are going to see the phrase NATO style attached to this story. The Guardian used it in a headline. It is a description written by journalists, not a term any of the 3 governments used. A Turkish official called the agreement purely defensive, not aimed at any particular country, and open to other states in the region. So, a real commitment, in writing, between 3 militaries, one of which is nuclear armed. What that means for the weapons themselves is a question the document does not answer, and we are not going to answer it for them. It may also be tested a great deal faster than the men signing it expected. On the same day that agreement was signed, Saudi Arabia was being hit. Houthi forces fired 8 missiles out of Al Jawf province in Yemen at targets in Hadramaut and Marib, striking camps belonging to the Homeland Shield Forces, the Emergency Forces, and the 1st Military Region. Al Jazeera's correspondent, Ahmed al-Shalafi, confirmed the impacts at around 2 in the afternoon local time. Roughly a dozen further missile attacks were reported Friday, though that count comes from the Houthi themselves. On the casualties, we have to slow down because the numbers do not agree. The Yemeni government says at least 30 people were killed and 15 wounded. The Houthis claim 45. France 24 cites a single unnamed source, putting the figure at 58. We are going to give you the government's number 30, and tell you that other counts run higher, because the alternative is to pick a number on your behalf, or to average 3 figures that were never measuring the same thing. Inside Saudi Arabia itself, 11 civilians were wounded in Najran, including a 4-year-old with 2nd-degree burns. 7 of the 11 were Saudi, 1 was Yemeni, 2 were Egyptian, and 1 was a Pakistani national. We are going to let that sit for a second. A Pakistani citizen was wounded on Saudi soil on the same day Pakistan put its name to a document promising to treat an attack on Saudi Arabia as an attack on Pakistan. We are not telling you that means anything in particular. Nobody has invoked the treaty, and there is no indication anyone intends to. But The Guardian wrote yesterday that the pact could face an early test from the Houthi conflict, and within a day of the signing, that conflict had put a Pakistani citizen in a Saudi hospital. One more item from the Saudi side, and it is a warning rather than an event. A senior Saudi official says intelligence suggests the Houthis and Iraqi armed groups may launch new attacks under the supervision of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, including on energy infrastructure, ports, and airports. That's an assessment about what might happen from an official who was not named. Which brings us back to the water. Yesterday we told you Iran and Oman had a draft framework to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and that Oman had said nothing about it. Oman has still said nothing. We looked again this morning, and every account of those terms still traces back to Tehran. But the president has now said something, and it is not what you would expect from a man announcing a deal. Asked yesterday whether an agreement had been reached, he answered, quote, "Well, I don't want to say it has been. It's sort of open right now." He said he is involved in the negotiation, that it is moving along good, and that it could be soon. He also described what Iran still holds in about the plainest language anyone has used. Quote, "They can always shoot something. If you have one mine sitting out there, you sort of mess things up." That's the whole difficulty. A framework on paper does not clear a shipping lane because one mine, or the credible suggestion of one, is enough to keep the insurers and the ship owners at home. We told you yesterday the framework would not automatically reopen the waterway. The president has now said something very close to that himself. We also said the number to watch was whether one ship owner would take a rock up on its $30 a barrel discount and go load crude. No new shipping data has published since Friday, so we do not have that answer today, and we are not going to invent one. To the markets. And this part will not quite make sense unless you were with us yesterday. On Friday, one day after a report showing American employers cut 23,000 jobs in July, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both closed at record highs. The S&P finished at 7,757, up 0.6%. The NASDAQ closed at 26,690, up 1 3/10. The Dow added 152 points. It was the best week for the major indexes since the middle of April. Two things are holding that up. About 85% of S&P 500 companies have beaten their second quarter earnings estimates, and the 10-year Treasury yield eased to 4.64% from 4.67. And the number we left you with yesterday has not moved at all. We told you the futures market put the odds of an interest rate cut at the Federal Reserve's September meeting at 0.0%. A full trading day later, with the stock market at an all-time high, it is still zero. This morning's reading is a 56% chance the Fed holds rates where they are, and a 44% chance it raises them. Hold those two facts next to each other, because that is the story. A record high is investors deciding that companies are earning well. It is not the Federal Reserve deciding that borrowing gets cheaper. With oil where the war has put it, those two things have come apart. And if you have a mortgage to refinance, it is the second one that reaches you. Quickly, the rest of the file. The head of Israel's Mossad fired 2 senior officials over a failed plan to topple Iran's government. The head of the Intelligence Directorate and the chief of the Iran division. The president signed 2 executive orders restricting birthright citizenship, which advisor Stephen Miller said extend the exclusions to alien enemies and members of foreign terrorist organizations. The American Civil Liberties Union says birthright citizenship cannot be changed by executive order at all. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski announced she will oppose Todd Blanche as Attorney General, citing his handling of the Epstein files and the remarks on abortion we covered Thursday. That confirmation now turns on Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. The Senate Homeland Security Committee voted to hold Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress after he invoked the Fifth Amendment more than 100 times before the committee chaired by Senator Rand Paul, and one we are attributing carefully. The Washington Post reports the president clashed with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over undisclosed shortages of long-range missiles and air defense, then publicly denied any shortage while threatening to jail whoever leaked it. That is the Post's reporting on a private meeting, and no one has confirmed it on the record. What to watch? 3 things. Whether any of the 3 governments that signed in Mecca says anything about what the agreement covers, particularly on the question the text avoids, whether Egypt or anyone else is invited into it, and whether Oman ever opens its mouth about a deal its partner has now described in detail for 2 straight days. That's the file. We'll be here tomorrow.